On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour, celebrating America. Coming up on this episode,
Kingman changed our motto to Heart of Historic Route 66 because we're at the middle of the longest remaining stretch.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hey there, thanks for joining us for this edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob. I'm Bob Phillips.
And I'm Kelly Phillips. As we've mentioned before, this year not only marks the 250th anniversary of our separation from the British Crown, it is also the 100th anniversary of Route 66, otherwise known as the Mother Road.
In fact, we did an entire one-hour show on Route 66 earlier, but this week we are going back to it in a place called Kingman, Arizona, and that's because this town celebrates Route 66 in a somewhat different way and for a different reason than most. And the person who leads that celebration isn't even from anywhere near here.
I am actually originally from Detroit, born and raised in Detroit. My family's still in Detroit for the most part, and came out west for my undergrad and met my husband in southern Utah. And so we stayed in the West and lived in Utah before we came to Arizona. Love history. History's always been my passion. It's been what I do for fun.
Leah Stagg is the director of the Historical Society here in Kingman, Arizona, located in Mojave County. Mojave, as in the Mojave Desert. Yes, it is hot and dry here, just the way Arizona folks like it.
What is it about history that you love so much?
So history, for starters, it was just the idea as a kid of being able to be a part of and touch something that has been around that long. It was the idea of being able to touch that. And then photographs. Photographs always got me. The idea that you could actually, there's this moment in history that's captured and you're a voyeur in it. The thing that catches me and that I am a firm believer in is because, I don't ever say history repeats itself, I say it echoes itself, but because of the fact that history is connected, you can see where we came from, where we're going, and people understand the world a little better and they seem a little more positive about where things are going and the fact that they have a say in where it goes. So museums are a spectacular way to do that because we're bringing it straight to you, but it's just a matter of bringing that opportunity to you to say, hey, did you want to know a little more about this? And by the way, this is where you fit in it. It suddenly feels very real when you connect with history.
History and its importance in our lives, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, is the thing that separates this town from a lot of other similar towns found along the road that runs through Kingman. You see, Kingman, Arizona, in the Mojave Desert, is one of those spectacular places you'll find along the famous Route 66 that runs from Chicago, Illinois, to Santa Monica, California.
Most of those towns boast their quaint shops, neon lights, and crazy diners. And while Kingman has all of that, it's the history of Route 66 that takes center stage here, where the goal is for the people who travel here and the people who live here to understand how they fit into that history.
What ends up happening is you sort of adopt the whole area as your own and you feel better like, I'm one of the people that gets this place, kind of a thing, and that's so you don't feel small, you feel like an important part of the process.
100 years ago, this thing started way over in Chicago, near where you're from, that part of the world, and made its way here, called Route 66. Tell us how that impacted Kingman in this area.
Route 66 really was the next step in a chain of movement. And one of the fascinating things about Route 66 was that people, it just sort of changed their connection with Kingman and their ability to move through it. It was bringing people in a different way. Sometimes the reason they were coming wasn't happy and rosy. It was an important stop. It was a respite for some people in different ways. People chose to stay, but Route 66 created a situation where more people could become acquainted with this part of the West in this area.
What kind of places sprang up because of the Mother Road?
So these Route 66 towns, it's amazing when you travel Arizona's Route 66 and you see these towns that come up. That is one of those times where you're like, what the heck? Where did this even come from? Because it does feel in the middle of this beautiful landscape, but it feels in the middle of nowhere. So
Did people travel here on Route 66 and say, oh, this is a great place. I think this is going to be the end of the journey?
There were quite a few people that did that because there were, even as the East was growing, as you get in through these areas through here, they realized there's the potential of sort of this, that American dream was very prevalent throughout this region. The idea that, okay, maybe back East has built up too much, but when I get out here, wait, I could totally open my own business, and look at all these people coming through. Or it's the same idea in some ways as the mining town. Well, they're going to need lawyers, and they're going to need, and all these. So that Route 66 becomes another avenue of the same system of building a community. This museum, you're going to see and become acquainted with the whole of Route 66 history. Now, we say Route 66 history, but we're talking long before it was Route 66. So what we want people to see is that the landscape, there's a pattern to it that carries over the centuries. The path of least resistance is alive and well for centuries. And you can see an echo of it that you can't see in other places. So you're going to see the whole of Route 66 history. You're going to see a ton of photographs. Photographs we got from the State Archives permission to use and other places, but you're going to see photographs, so you're going to see people. So once again, it's that idea of being of a voyeur in history, an observer of history, where you can lose yourself in that photograph.
If I'm coming through Kingman, give me the top few things that if somebody's going to spend a few hours here, you really want them to pay attention to and to see.
So I'm going to say the Route 66 Museum for sure. I'm going to say our Mojave Museum as well, because you're going to get the Mojave Museum of History and Arts. You're going to get ranching and mining history. Spend some time in the shops. Spend some time walking around downtown. There's some great hiking
Very
trails.
popular these days.
There's some lovely places to do that. There's a lot. Spend the time around the people. I think that's the big thing. Spend some time around the people. Really, you can make a couple days of stay here and enjoy yourself thoroughly. Probably going to walk away going, oh my gosh, this place is wild.
What's one thing that you hope people that come through this museum, you want them to take away?
I want them to know that the history of Route 66 had its ups and downs, just like anything else, and that the story of Route 66 isn't, well, it's wonderful, and we talk about the neon lights, and isn't that spectacular? The big thing here is to learn that Route 66 history is this story of people living their lives, whether it's passing through or staying put. And sometimes our lives are messy and sometimes they're great, but it becomes this metaphor for this larger story of the United States and American lives.
Okay, now, we went to Kingman, Arizona on purpose, but we kind of stumbled into the Kingman Visitor Center and Route 66 Museum.
Yeah, we had no idea it was there. They had no idea we were coming. But when we walked in the place, we knew there was a deeper story here that we needed to tell.
Leah Stagg, the person you just heard from, gave us the perspective, but then turned us over to a guy named Josh Noble, who is the tourism services manager at the museum.
So we want to bring you some of our conversation with Josh, hear his perspective on all of that. But first, a bit more from Leah Stack.
You say
History
echoes.
Yeah.
Explain that.
If history echoes, it can't exactly be the same. There's different contexts that are different. And as soon as I hear it repeats itself, that means it's perfect. And that means I don't need to dig into it anymore because I read that book or I saw that post. And that is when you find something that works, you sort of jump on it and you grow from there. And you get excited about it. And so, that's where ranching was huge out here. And it was huge on an international level. We were a big part of the ranching industry. Mining, of course, was massive. And mining goes up and down. And Arizona's full of ghost towns. So we know that mining had its ups and downs. But one of the things that we can say for sure is that people were living in this area for a long time. And they were building communities and their families, even if they were small groups. I think you see the layers of history very clearly in Mojave County.
And you can really see the evolution of this thing we call the human being.
Exactly. And I think sometimes you can see that, okay, maybe we haven't evolved as much as we thought, because there are certain things that still maintain and look the same. And
are desert people different than non-desert people?
I would say yes. I watch my kids grow up in the desert and it cracks me up.
Because you grew up in Detroit.
In Detroit, yeah. My kids don't wear shoes. Desert kids are a hoot. They just don't get fazed by it much because, it could, there's so much of having to roll with the punches with desert people, I think. If you're choosing to be here, regardless of the year you're choosing to be here, if you're choosing to be here, you are already making certain compromises so that you can have space and so that you can have this sort of quieter life and these different things in being in touch with nature. You've already made some compromises going into it.
Talk to us about Kingman, Arizona.
Kingman is a delightful balance of older families that have been here forever and a whole bunch of transplants. People that are adopting this place as their home, like us, that are raising their children here, and so they're bringing up this other generation of this being home. It is a middle point, logistically and geographically. It's a middle point to all of these things, but it's one of those middle points that gives you a reason to stay and sort of stop and look around. Kingman, because of the kind of town that it was built as, is always sort of in a state of becoming. And in the West, there are plenty of spots that, especially in mining areas, you can see this moment where they can see themselves practically becoming the Paris of the West. And they're sure they're going to be this because mining is getting so good it can only go up. And then 10 years later, nobody's there. But because of where it is and the fact that it has still played a role in how people get around and what people do, that it is in this constant state of becoming. And so there's always potential in Kingman. And that's been kind of a fascinating thing to watch happen and to be a part of in some ways. We have spectacular museums. There's a lot of wonderful little shops and people that have decided to start their own small businesses in the area. And that is huge. So there's a lot of little unique places. You're within driving distance of a lot of hiking spots. You're within driving distance of the Grand Canyon, and the Grand Canyon is spectacular from any view, and that's kind of what's amazing. And so Kingman is also, there's so many natural wonders around it.
You have your dream job, whether you've realized it or not. We realize you've landed in your dream job. You get to be the conveyor of our history, of our story, as a nation, as people. What is having this and being able to do that, what does that do for you right here?
Oh my gosh. So we have a program actually this year that we're rolling out for the Route 66 corridor, actually called History is My Story. And that is, it is the most exciting and emotional experience for me to be able to get people, and especially kids, to realize history is happening around them. and they have a connection with the past. And the idea that you can have people feel connected with something that it's actually kind of a fascinating idea. That time machine may never be built. So the idea that you can get people to feel connected to something that they're really connecting with what we're telling them probably happened, but I can't recreate it perfectly, and they still feel emotionally connected to it, and they feel like having a conversation about it, that's the big thing. Not just observing it, but if they start weighing in, whether or not I agree with their opinion, if they start weighing in on the past, and I'm going, oh my gosh, they took the bait, this is amazing. Because once you start weighing in on something, knowing that it's already happened, but it must be significant, you're weighing in for a contemporary reason. Something that's happening now is influencing you to reach into the past, and you've already been able to see there's a connection here, there's a pattern, there's a trail that I'm taking.
And then we met Josh Noble, who had a lot of things to say about Kingman, this museum, and of course, Route 66.
So this is the Kingman Visitor Center and Arizona Route 66 Museum. The building was built in 1907, but we renovated it and opened up this museum in 2001. There are about a dozen different Route 66 museums across the country, each with its own focus. This one is specifically the chronological history of Route 66. And that's important because everyone knows about the famous highway in the 20th century, but they don't realize it was a Native American trading route and migration route before that for centuries, and then a wagon road, and then a railroad before it was ever a paved highway. So we have different sections of the museum that cover the different eras from early migration routes. Actually, this is some great displays of the artifacts of the Native American peoples that lived in this area and first developed the road that became what is Route 66 today. And then in the 1850s, it became a wagon road. This was actually the first federally funded wagon road. They used camels in 1857 to build the road out in the Southwest. And when they put that road in, that brought in miners because people were prospecting, they were finding gold and things. They had ranchers because they brought out troops to kind of protect the road. And all of that precipitated the need for a better way of moving product. And that's why the railroad was built, because it could move ore for processing from the mines. It could move cattle from the ranches into the populated areas. And the railroad followed the same path because what you had was the Native American trails followed the lay of the land. Went from spring to spring, avoided the mountain ranges. Well, that's what wagons did. The animals needed water. So they went spring to spring. They avoided the mountain ranges, and the trains were the same. Trains don't like mountains. They were steam driven. They needed water sources. So they followed the lay of the land, went spring to spring. And then when the road was built, it followed the same path because early cars didn't have the capabilities to do huge grades. In fact, they were gravity driven fuel tanks. So you had to have a pretty level lay of land. In fact, there's a real famous area going up through Open Highway where they would drive the vehicles up the grades backwards in order to feed fuel into the tanks. So there were locals that they'd hire to drive their vehicles up because you had these hairpin turns. In fact, it's called the Arizona Sidewinder. I think there's 192 twists and turns.
Oh my gosh.
Through this, 25-mile stretch going up into Oatman. It's a beautiful drive. In fact, that's, if you ever wanted to see the driving down the twisty, windy road from, the 20s, 30s, it's probably the most scenic drive that you'll ever have on 66 Silman Highway.
So how long is Route 66 in Arizona itself?
There's a little over 300 miles. I don't know the exact amount of it, but the longest remaining continuous stretch is in Arizona, and that's 157.87 miles. And that goes from just east of Ash Fork, which is a little bit, or just west of Ash Fork, which is a little bit east of Seligman. That's known as the birthplace of historic Route 66. That's where Angel Delgadillo lives, all the way to the Colorado River. And Kingman's right in the middle of that. If you go out on that, the section east of Kingman is a lot like post-World War II. It's very big car culture, long highways, cool little curio shops and things along the way. And then that section going east or west of Kingman towards California is very much like the pre-World War II, the 1930s, 1920s. And that's because Route 66 was rerouted where Interstate 40 goes now, going west to Kingman in 1952. So that original portion of Route 66 was preserved.
What does Route 66 mean to Kingman, to this town?
You know, I had some Australian journalists that were here writing a story a couple of years ago, and they came in, we hosted them for lunch, and they said, I have never seen a city that has so many Route 66 shields and all the businesses. This must be, you know, big for Kingman. And it really is. You know, we had a real resurgence after Interstate 40 finally bypassed Route 66. Here in Arizona, it was in 1982, 1985, actually, in Williams. And the businesses that were along those major, you know, Route 66 routes really were suffering. Angel Delgadillo, he's a barber from Seligman, Arizona. They were totally bypassed. And you sometimes had cars that came off the interstate and they found their way into town to gas up. People talked about stories of remembering traveling Route 66 when they were younger. So he said, you know, I think we have something here. This could be something for our economy because people are looking for yesteryear. So he got with some business people in Kingman, and together 15 people joined the Route 66 Association of Arizona. They lobbied the state government to dedicate Route 66 as a historic highway, which happened in 1988.
One of the great things you can do at the Route 66 Museum in Kingman is talk to a hologram of the man Josh just mentioned, Angel Delgadillo, who people around these parts consider to be the savior of Route 66.
Why was Route 66 worth saving?
Why was Route 66 worth saving? Gray-haired grown men and women all sounded like a recording. They told me when I was a little boy, when I was a little girl, this has got to be the highway that my parents drove during the Great Depression when it quit raining in the Midwestern states. At first, I didn't pay no attention to what they said, but I heard it over and over and over, day in, day out, and I began the same thing. What do you want? You got a super highway here that takes you from point A to point B. The fact remains, you don't know what you have until you lose it. They were looking for a floor way of life. Route 66 was beautiful for them. On I-40, there was nothing to see. You don't see the real America of yesterday.
And that Kingman changed our motto to Heart of Historic Route 66 because we're at the middle of the longest remaining stretch. And ever since that, we've really just leaned into Route 66 as part of our history.
Have you driven all of Route 66?
I've not driven all of it. I've driven up into Oklahoma. I've been up into Chicago. I've been in a lot of different pieces, but I've been back and forth in Arizona several times.
Do you have a favorite place on Route 66?
A favorite place on Route 66?
Other than Kingman.
Well, I mean, Open Highway, and I know that's nearby. It is a beautiful stretch, such a beautiful road, and you have to take it so slow that you do get to appreciate it because some of the speed limits are 15 miles an hour around those turns. I've really enjoyed time in Albuquerque. I think that downtown Albuquerque is really beautiful. I've enjoyed in downtown Chicago. My one thing is, if you've seen the where the road begins, Route 66 start sign, it's a little bit lonely. I wish they'd do something to spruce that space up. But I've enjoyed, I think, how Route 66 brings people together, but they're all very different. So the Route 66 that you see in Oklahoma, the Route 66 you see in Illinois, the Route 66 in California and Arizona, the people come from different backgrounds. You know, it's a different aesthetic, but it's all Route 66. And I think that's a real microcosm of what America is.
As you step out of the historic Powerhouse and back onto the pavement, you realize that this museum isn't just preserving history, it's keeping the spirit of the open road alive. Now, Kingman, Arizona sits at the heart of the longest remaining continuous stretch of Route 66. It's a living reminder that while highways can be bypassed, the human urge to explore never will be. A reminder that this is not only the 250th birthday of America, but it is also the 100th anniversary of Route 66. There's so much to see and do, and we highly, highly recommend the drive. Thanks for joining us for this week's edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour. The journey continues every week with us dropping new episodes. So listen wherever you get your podcast or download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.